Deion Sanders takes new recruiting approach. Is he copying Indiana's? What's happening in Boulder right now feels less like a trend chase and more like a correction born from hard lessons. And Deion Sanders isn't hiding from the reason why. A season that ended 3-9 forced Colorado to confront uncomfortable truths. And rather than doubling down on the same methods, Sanders has pivoted toward a recruiting blueprint that looks strikingly similar to the one that has carried Indiana Hoosiers all the way to the national championship game against Miami Hurricanes on January 19th. At the center of that blueprint is a simple but powerful idea: production over potential. In the current transfer portal cycle, Sanders has leaned heavily into players who have already proven they can carry responsibility on Saturdays. 23 of Colorado's incoming transfers played outside the Power 4 spotlight, coming from places like Albany, Monmouth, Lafayette, New Mexico State, North Dakota State, Sacramento State, and San Jose State. These aren't anonymous flyers. They are starters with film, players who have been focal points of game plans rather than theoretical upside buried on a depth chart. In a portal economy that rewards immediacy, Sanders is betting that evidence matters more than projection. "I know what I want," Sanders said recently on the Morning Run podcast. "I know how I want it. I know what we need and how we need it and the type of young man that we needed." That confidence is backed by a measurable shift. According to data compiled by USA Today Sports, Colorado has secured commitments from 35 transfer players this year. Only 11 come from Power 4 programs in the Big 12, Big 10, ACC, or SEC, plus one from Notre Dame. The rest arrive from the Group of Five and the FCS. In Sanders' previous 3 recruiting cycles, more than half of his transfers came from Power 4 schools. This year, the balance has flipped. The logic behind the pivot is rooted in experience. Power 4 backups often enter the portal searching for opportunity, but there is risk baked into that profile. Sometimes the lack of playing time is circumstantial. Sometimes it isn't. Sanders acknowledged last year that Colorado missed on a number of those bets. This time, the staff is prioritizing players who have already handled volume, pressure, and accountability, even if they did it away from the national spotlight. One of the clearest examples is former San Jose State wide receiver Danny Scudero, who led the nation in receiving yards per game in 2025 at 108.1. Players like Scudero are often looking for two things when they move up a level: a bigger stage and expanded nil opportunity. What they bring in return is certainty. They've already shown they can produce when defenses know the ball is coming their way. The approach has drawn comparisons to Indiana coach Curt Cignetti, whose rapid rebuild has become one of the defining stories of the season. Former Penn State tight end Adam Brenneman called the philosophy the smartest counter to the current portal economy, noting that proven starters from the FCS and Group of Five have already demonstrated the ability to handle pressure, while Power 4 backups remain projections. That influence is not accidental, but the relationship cuts both ways. In 2024, Cignetti brought 13 players with him to Indiana from James Madison, where he had coached outside the Power 4, mirroring what Sanders did a year earlier when he arrived in Boulder with 9 scholarship players from Jackson State, including quarterback Shedeur Sanders and two-way star Travis Hunter, who went on to win the Heisman Trophy. Those moves laid foundations that paid off quickly, with Colorado going 9-4 in 2024 and Indiana earning consecutive college football playoff berths in 2024 and 2025. Cignetti then pushed the idea further. In his first season at Indiana, 23 of his 30 transfers came from outside the Power 4, players who had already been 2- or 3-year starters. One of them, former James Madison receiver Elijah Sarrett, leads the Hoosiers with 15 touchdown catches this season. "We signed 22 guys that all have been 2- or 3-year starters with consistent production," Cignetti said earlier this month. "I knew we had flipped the roster." Sanders is following a similar path while still dipping into the Power 4 selectively. Texas wide receiver DeAndre Moore Jr. and Vanderbilt safety Randon Fontenette both bring starting experience from major conferences. But Sanders has expanded the search far beyond that, targeting players like Albany defensive lineman Balansama Kamara, who led his team with 7.5 sacks. New offensive coordinator Brennan Marion has also leaned into familiarity, planning to bring multiple players from Sacramento State, where he previously served as head coach. There is risk in the model. Not all lower division production translates physically or mentally at the Power 4 level. Brenneman warned that evaluation is everything, noting that copying the idea without the eye to identify which production scales will fail quickly. Sanders believes the answer lies in intentionality, not volume. One clear difference between Sanders and Signetti remains high school recruiting. Signetti has already begun tapering his portal usage as Indiana's success fuels traditional recruiting. Sanders, by contrast, continues to sign relatively few high school players, only 11 for the 2026 class, operating on the belief that if a recruit can't play early, he's likely to leave anyway. That approach has raised concerns about continuity, especially with more than 30 scholarship players transferring out this offseason, including offensive tackle Jordan Seaton and safety Tawfiq Bayard. Critics argue constant turnover makes it impossible to build cohesion. Sanders counters that the answer is fewer misses and more certainty. "We're intentional with everything we do," he said. As Indiana prepares to play for its first national title, the results of that philosophy are impossible to ignore. Now Sanders is betting that production, not promise, is the quickest path to making Colorado relevant again, even if the road looks unconventional. What ultimately separates Sanders' current pivot from a simple copycat narrative is the context in which it's happening. Indiana's rise under Curt Signetti has been clean, almost linear. Identify proven veterans, flip the roster, win early, then gradually rebalance toward high school recruiting as success compounds. Colorado's situation is messier, louder, and far less forgiving. Sanders isn't applying this model from a position of calm momentum. He's applying it under pressure, with skepticism swirling and patience thinning. That's why the emphasis on intentionality keeps surfacing in his language. Sanders isn't pretending this is a perfect science. He's acknowledging that the margin for error has shrunk. In a program that has endured constant turnover, the cost of missing on portal evaluations is amplified. One wrong projection can ripple through an entire position group. Production, even if it comes from a lower level, reduces that uncertainty. Tape doesn't guarantee success, but it does eliminate guesswork. This is also where Sanders' approach subtly diverges from Signetti's in practice, not philosophy. Indiana's portal-heavy build happened largely in a vacuum, without the glare that follows Colorado. Boulder exists in a national fishbowl. Every transfer in and out becomes commentary on culture, leadership, and direction. Sanders has had to learn not just how to evaluate players, but how to absorb the narrative consequences of roster churn. That reality has likely accelerated his move toward safer bets. Former Colorado linebacker Chad Brown articulated the core criticism when he questioned how continuity can exist if everything resets annually. It's a fair concern, and one Sanders hasn't dismissed outright. Instead, he appears to be redefining continuity itself. Rather than continuity of faces, he's chasing continuity of profile. Older players, multi-year starters, men who arrive already understanding accountability. In Sanders' vision, cohesion comes from shared experience, not shared tenure. That bet hinges on evaluation discipline. Sanders' staff can't afford lazy assessments. They must distinguish between production that is context-driven and production that is transferable. That's where relationships matter. Brennan Marion's familiarity with Sacramento State players isn't coincidence. It's risk management. Knowing how a player works, prepares, and responds to adversity is as valuable as any stat line. There's also an underappreciated psychological edge to this approach. Group of 5 and FCS standouts often arrive with urgency rather than entitlement. They're not coming to prove they belong. They already have. They're coming to elevate their ceiling. That hunger can reshape a locker room faster than raw talent alone. Sanders is clearly betting that Edge can offset some of the continuity concerns critics raise. Still, this strategy won't be judged by theory. It will be judged by Saturdays. If Colorado remains stuck near the bottom of the standings, the production over potential mantra will be framed as desperation rather than design. But if the Buffalo stabilize, if the roster plays faster, cleaner, and more connected, the narrative flips quickly. Then Sanders won't be seen as copying Indiana. He'll be seen as adapting in real time, learning from both his own misses and other successes.